You hold a scalpel like a toddler holds a crayon, Hughes. Get out of my sterile field before you kill someone. Dr. Joseph Ward's voice cracked like a whip across the operating theatre, echoing off the tiled walls. Brianna snickered behind her surgical mask, her eyes crinkling with unmasked malice, enjoying the spectacle. Kimberly Hughes shrank back, clutching the tray of instruments against her chest, eyes downcast, shoulders trembling violently. I'm sorry, Doctor. The gloves, they're slippery. She fumbled, dropping a hemostat with a deafening clang that silenced the room. Pathetic, Shannon Perry hissed as she shoved past, checking the patient's vitals with exaggerated competence. Go change bedpans. That's all you're good for. Kimberly retreated to the shadows, hiding the cold, predatory calculation suddenly sharpening behind her teary eyes. The trauma center at St. Jude's Metropolitan Hospital was a symphony of controlled chaos, smelling of isopropyl alcohol, copper blood, and fear. For Kimberly Hughes, it was a theater of operations where her camouflage was incompetence. She moved through the corridors with a deliberate shuffle, a slight stoop in her posture that shaved 2 inches off her height. To the staff, she was the new nurse, a nameless, faceless entity of clumsiness who had barely passed her boards. Shannon Perry, the head nurse with a penchant for psychological warfare, stood at the nurse's station, holding court. I give her 2 weeks, Shannon said, loud enough for Kimberly to hear as she restocked a crash cart nearby. She flinched when Dr. Ward asked for suction, flinched like the machine was going to bite her. Brianna, a junior nurse who shadowed Shannon like a remora on a shark, laughed. Did you see her hands? Shaking. I wouldn't trust her to put a Band-Aid on a paper cut. Kimberly kept her head down, arranging epinephrine ampules. Her hands were indeed shaking, a practiced tremor she could turn on and off like a light switch. Inside her mind, however, the silence was absolute. She wasn't listening to their insults. She was counting the exits. North exit, clear. East hallway, obstructed by gurney, 2 civilians. Security guard at the double doors. Overweight, weapon holster unbuttoned, attention span 0. Hughes! Dr. Joseph Ward stormed out of Trauma Room 1, stripping off bloody latex gloves. He was a competent surgeon, but a man whose ego required a constant diet of adoration and a whipping boy. Kimberly was the latter. The inventory in OR3 is a disaster. If I find 1 sponge unaccounted for, you're fired. Do you understand? Yes, Dr. Ward. Immediately, Dr. Ward, Kimberly stammered, backing away, allowing her hip to bump into a rolling IV stand. It rattled dangerously. Ward rolled his eyes, a theatrical gesture for Shannon's benefit. God help us! How does HR find these people? Kimberly scurried away, turning the corner toward the supply closet. The moment she was out of sight, her gait smoothed. The stoop vanished. She checked her watch, a cheap digital Casio on the surface, but she used the reflection to sweep the hallway behind her. Clear. She entered the supply closet and locked the door. For 10 seconds, she allowed herself to breathe. She wasn't Kimberly Hughes, the incompetent RN. She was an asset in deep cover, placed here to monitor a suspected leak in the localized intelligence network. But the mission had been dead quiet for 3 months. Boring. The boredom was the dangerous part. It made the mask heavy. She reached into the back of a shelf, behind boxes of saline, and touched the cold steel of a taped-down Glock 43. It was still there, secure. Hughes, where the hell are those sponges? Ward's voice boomed from the hallway. Kimberly sighed, the predator receding, the prey returning. She grabbed a box of sterile sponges, reintroduced the tremor to her hands, and unlocked the door. Coming, Doctor. Back at the station, the radio crackled to life. the static cutting through the ambient noise of the ER. The paramedic's voice was breathless, high-pitched with adrenaline. "Mercy Base, this is Unit 4 Alpha. We are inbound. ETA 3 minutes. We have a code red. Male, mid-30s. Multiple GSWs to the chest and abdomen. Massive hemorrhage. BP is 70/40 and dropping. Patient is high profile. Repeat, high profile. We have a police escort." The atmosphere in the ER shifted instantly. The petty bullying evaporated, replaced by the sharpening of professional instincts. Even Ward straightened up, smoothing his scrubs. "Trauma 1, Ward barked. "Shannon, get the blood bank on the line. I want O negative, 6 units, stat. Brianna, prep the intubation tray. Hughes." He paused, looking at her with disdain. "Stay out of the way. Stand in the corner and don't touch anything unless I tell you to. If this patient dies because you tripped over a power cord, I will end your career." I'll stay back, sir," Kimberly whispered. She moved to the far corner of the trauma room, her back against the wall. From this vantage point, she had a clear line of sight to the bay doors, the patient table, and the secondary exit. Objective: observe. Distance: 4 meters to patient 0. Threat: unknown incoming. The sirens grew louder, a wailing banshee scream that signaled death was riding shotgun. Tires screeched outside the bay doors. The doors burst open, and the world accelerated. The gurney crashed into the room, flanked by 2 paramedics and 2 uniformed police officers who looked terrified. On the stretcher lay a mountain of a man. His tactical gear had been cut away, revealing a torso that was a ruin of muscle and blood. "Transfer on 3, a paramedic shouted. 1, 2, 3. They heaved the body onto the trauma table. Blood was everywhere, pooling on the floor, slick and bright red, arterial. "Talk to me," Ward commanded, stepping in. "Multiple hits, 2 to the thoracic cavity, 1 to the left lower quadrant," the paramedic rattled off. "Tachycardic. Breath sounds diminished on the left. We decompressed in the field, but he's filling up again." Kimberly watched from her corner. Her eyes scanned the patient's body, bypassing the gore to read the story written in scars and tattoos. Her gaze locked on a faint, faded trident, tattooed on his left deltoid, partially obscured by blood. A trident. Seal. She looked at his face. Beneath the grime, the blood, and the oxygen mask, she recognized the jawline. Target identification: Commander Zachary Green. Call sign: Viper. Status: critical. Her heart hammered a double-time rhythm, not from fear, but from recognition. Green wasn't just a SEAL. He was the man who had pulled her out of a collapsed safe house in Benghazi 6 years ago. He was the reason she was alive to play this pathetic role. "He's crashing!" Shannon yelled. "BP is 60 palp. We're losing him!" "Tube him!" Ward shouted. "Brianna, get that line in! I can't find a vein." "I'm trying, doctor. His veins are collapsed." Brianna's voice was rising in panic. Ward grabbed a scalpel. "I'm doing a cut-down. Move!" The room was frantic. Ward was working fast, but he was panicked. The injuries were catastrophic. He was focused on the abdomen, but Kimberly saw the real threat. The chest tube the paramedics had inserted was kinked. The tension pneumothorax was returning. Green was suffocating, his heart being crushed by the pressure in his own chest. Kimberly stepped forward, forgetting the shuffle. "Doctor, the chest tube is occluded. He has a tension pneuma." "Shut up, Hughes!" Ward didn't look up. "I said stay back!" "He's going into arrest!" Shannon screamed. "V-fib!" Clear. Shocking. The body convulsed on the table. Kimberly watched Green's eyes flutter open. They were blue, piercing, and shockingly lucid for a man dying of blood loss. He looked around wildly, the soldier's instinct fighting through the shock. He saw the frantic doctors, the lights. Then His gaze swept the room and locked on the woman in the corner. He blinked. He focused. He didn't see the oversized scrubs or the slumped posture. He saw the eyes. Green's bloody hand lifted from the table. It was a tremulous, weak movement. The doctors ignored it, thinking it was a spasm. But Kimberly knew. He raised his hand to his brow. A slow, shaky salute. "Ghost," he rasped through the oxygen mask. The sound was barely a whisper, drowned out by the alarms, but Kimberly heard it. Ward looked up, annoyed. "Restrain him! He's thrashing!" "He saluted," Brianna said, confused, pausing with the IV bag. "Who is he saluting?" "He's hypoxic, you idiot! He's hallucinating!" Ward snapped. "Hughes, make yourself useful and hold his legs down. He's going to kick the instrument tray." Kimberly moved. She didn't scurry. She glided. She reached the side of the table. Green's hand fell, grabbing her wrist with a grip that was surprisingly strong. He squeezed 3 times. Dash, dash, dash. Tactical signal. Danger close. Kimberly froze. This wasn't a random shooting. This was a hit, and the job wasn't finished. She looked at the police officers standing by the door. One of them was looking at his phone, typing rapidly. The other was sweating profusely, his hand hovering near his sidearm, but his eyes weren't on the patient. They were on the staff. Analysis. Officer 1 is signaling. Officer 2 is prepping for engagement. These aren't cops. "Get him stable," Kimberly said. Her voice was different. The stutter was gone. The pitch dropped an octave into a command register. Ward stopped, scalpel mid-air. He looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time. "Excuse me, did you just give me an order?" I said. "Stabilize him, Doctor," Kimberly said, her voice ice-cold. "Because we are about to have company." "Get out!" Ward roared, pointing with the scalpel. "Get out of my OR, right now. You are fired." The lights went out. The emergency backup generators kicked in 4 seconds later, bathing the room in a dim, amber emergency light. The hum of the ventilation system died, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. "What is happening?" Brianna whimpered, backing away from the table. "Power grid failure," Shannon said, her voice trembling. "It happens. The backups are on." "No," Kimberly said. She released Green's wrist and took a step back, her body angling toward the door. "Cut power disables the mag locks on the perimeter doors. It kills the security cameras." "Stop talking crazy, Hughes," Ward shouted, though he looked pale in the amber light. "Someone call maintenance." Thwip, a sound like a wet towel hitting a tile floor. The police officer who had been texting spun around, a small red hole appearing in the center of his forehead. He crumpled to the ground without a sound. "Oh my God," Shannon whispered. The second officer, the one sweating, drew his weapon, but he didn't aim at the door. He aimed at the table. At Commander Green. Objective: neutralize internal threat. Distance: 3 meters. Weapon: 9mm service pistol. Kimberly didn't think. The data stream in her mind converted instantly into kinetic energy. As the fake cop raised his gun, the timid nurse exploded into motion. She grabbed a heavy stainless steel Mayo stand, loaded with instruments. With a torque of her hips generated from the core, she swung it like a baseball bat. The heavy metal tray collided with the gunman's outstretched arm. Bone crunched. The gun discharged, the bullet shattering a glass cabinet of saline fluids behind Ward, spraying the surgeon with glass and water. Ward screamed and dove under the operating table. Brianna dropped to the floor, curling into a ball. The gunman roared, dropping the weapon and clutching his shattered arm. He reached for a backup knife in his boot. Kimberly didn't stop. She closed the distance. She wasn't the clumsy girl who dropped hemostats. She was a kinetic weapon. She stepped inside his guard, her left hand trapping his good arm, her right hand driving an elbow into his trachea. Cartilage collapsed. The man gagged, eyes bulging. Kimberly swept his leg, driving him face first into the hard linoleum. She finished it with a precise, violent stomp to the back of the neck. He went limp. Silence returned to the room, heavier than before. Kimberly stood over the body. Her chest wasn't heaving. Her breathing was rhythmic, controlled. N234, OUT 234. She bent down, retrieved the gunman's fallen pistol, ejected the magazine to check the load, full, and racked the slide. She turned to face the room. Ward was peering out from under the table, his face a mask of absolute, incomprehensible shock. Shannon was pressed against the wall, mouth agape. Kimberly Hughes stood tall. The slump was gone. Her eyes were hard, scanning the doorway. She held the pistol with perfect Weaver stance discipline, finger indexed along the frame. "Dr. Ward," Kimberly said. The voice was unrecognizable to them, authoritative, lethal. "Get up. You have a patient to save. If you stop working, this man dies. And if he dies, I will be very displeased. You just—" Ward stammered, pointing a shaking finger at the dead man on the floor. "You killed him." "He was a threat," Kimberly stated flatly. "There are 3 more in the hallway. I can hear their boots. They aren't wearing sneakers." She walked over to the door and engaged the manual deadbolt, then dragged the heavy crash cart in front of it. "Who are you?" Shannon whispered, terror mixing with awe. Kimberly ignored the question. She looked at Commander Green. He was conscious, barely. A faint, bloody smile touched his lips. "Permission to engage, Commander?" Kimberly asked softly. Green nodded once. Kimberly turned back to the staff. "Listen to me closely. We are in a kill box. The people outside that door are here to finish the job on the commander. They will kill everyone in this room to eliminate witnesses. That includes you, Dr. Ward. That includes you, Shannon." She walked to the instrument tray, holstered the gun in the waistband of her scrubs, and picked up 2 scalpels. "I need you to focus on the surgery," Kimberly said. "I will handle the rest." "You're a nurse," Ward squeaked. Kimberly looked at the door as the handle began to rattle violently from the other side. Someone kicked it, hard. "No, doctor," she said, flipping the scalpel in her hand so the blade faced outward. "I'm the reason you're going to live through the next 10 minutes." The door buckled under a heavy impact. A battering ram. Target, breach team. Estimated strength, 3 to 4 tangos. Armor, likely level 3 Kevlar. Kimberly positioned herself in the blind spot of the doorway. "Get back to work," she commanded. Ward, terrified beyond reason, scrambled back to the table and picked up his instruments. His hands were shaking, but he started suturing. The door burst open, shoving the crash cart aside. The shift was complete. The nurse was gone. The ghost was home. The double doors of Trauma 1 didn't just open, they disintegrated. The battering ram hit the center junction with the force of a freight train, splintering the locking mechanism and sending the heavy crash cart skidding across the linoleum like a toy. Dust and drywall pulverized into the air, creating a momentary choke point of visibility. Dr. Ward screamed, a high-pitched sound of primal terror, and curled into a fetal ball beneath the operating table. Brianna was hyperventilating, clutching a sterile drape as if it were a shield. Kimberly Hughes did not scream. She did not flinch. She ceased to be a person and became a targeting computer. Objective: suppress entry. Distance: 7 meters. Windage: kneel. Threat: 3 hostiles, armored. Through the haze of dust, a black-clad figure emerged, leading with the barrel of a suppressed HK-416. The suppressor was a long, cylindrical shadow against the amber emergency lights. Kimberly fired. The Glock 43 barked twice, a controlled pair. The sounds were sharp cracks, deafening in the enclosed acoustic chamber of the OR. The lead operator's head snapped back. The 9mm rounds found the gap between his ballistic helmet and his plate carrier, punching through the throat. He dropped without a sound, his rifle clattering to the floor. "Contact front!" a voice roared from the hallway. "Man down! Breach failed!" Two more shadows moved to fill the doorway, using the frame as cover. They sprayed the room blindly. Bullets chewed up the tiled walls, shattering the glass of the medicine cabinets and sending shards raining down like deadly confetti. Sparks flew from the overhead surgical lights. "Get down!" Kimberly yelled, not with fear, but with command authority. She grabbed the edge of a stainless steel supply table and flipped it onto its side, creating a makeshift barricade. She dove behind it, dragging a hysterical Shannon with her. "They're shooting at us! They're actually shooting at us!" Shannon sobbed, her hands covering her ears. "Stay low and shut up," Kimberly hissed. She popped up, fired 3 rounds to keep the attackers honest, and ducked back down as return fire pinged off the steel table. She glanced at the patient. Commander Green was awake, his eyes glassy but focused. He was trying to sit up, blood soaking through the fresh bandages Ward had applied. "Viper sit rep," Kimberly demanded, reloading her weapon. Her hands moved with a blur of muscle memory. Mag out, fresh mag in, slide release. "King!" Green rasped, coughing up blood. "It's Oliver King!" He turned. Kimberly's eyes narrowed. Oliver King, ex-SAS, now a private contractor, mercenary, lethal. It explained the precision of the breach. They weren't fighting street thugs. They were fighting Tier 1 operators. "Ward!" Kimberly shouted over the gunfire. "Is the bleeder clamped?" I can't," came the muffled reply from under the table. Kimberly turned to Shannon. She grabbed the head nurse by the scrub top and yanked her close. Their faces were inches apart. Shannon saw death in Kimberly's eyes, but she also saw absolute, unshakable calm. "Listen to me," Kimberly said, her voice cutting through the noise. "Ward is useless. You are the senior nurse. If you don't stabilize that artery, the commander bleeds out. If he dies, I have no reason to protect you. Do you understand?" Shannon stared at her, trembling. The clumsy girl who dropped trays was gone. In her place was a warrior goddess of death. I understand," Shannon whispered. "Go. Crawl. Stay below the table line." Shannon nodded, swallowed her terror, and crawled toward the operating table. Kimberly turned back to the door. The firing had stopped. They were regrouping. King wouldn't rush a fatal funnel twice. He would use grenades next. Tactical analysis. Enemy is transitioning to fragmentation. Time to impact. Less than 10 seconds. "We're moving," Kimberly announced. "Grab the ambu bag and the monitor. We are leaving." "Leaving?" Brianna squeaked from the corner. "Into the hallway? They're in the hallway." "Not that hallway," Kimberly said. She aimed her pistol at the large observation window overlooking the scrub room. She fired 4 rounds into the corners of the glass, then kicked the center. The safety glass shattered into 1,000,000 diamonds. "Go, through the window." She grabbed the back of the gurney. "Ward, get up and push, or I leave you here for King." Dr. Ward scrambled up, looking like a man possessed, and grabbed the foot of the bed. Together they heaved the heavy gurney toward the shattered window, just as a black metal sphere rolled into the room through the main doors. "Frag out!" Kimberly yelled, shoving Ward through the broken window frame. She vaulted through after him, dragging the gurney, just as the grenade detonated. The blast wave punched the breath out of them, sending a fireball rolling out of the OR, scorching the air where they had stood seconds ago. The scrub room was dark, lit only by the flickering red strobes of the fire alarm system. The air was thick with the smell of cordite and pulverized concrete. Is everyone alive? Kimberly asked, checking the hallway beyond the scrub room. I think so, Shannon coughed, checking Green's pulse. He's still with us. Pulse is thready, 130 beats per minute. We need to get to the sub-level, Kimberly said. Radiology. The walls are lead-lined. It's a bunker. Why not the roof? Ward asked, wiping soot from his face. The helipad. King will have a sniper on the adjacent building covering the roof, Kimberly explained, her eyes scanning the shadows. The roof is a kill zone. The basement is a maze. We use the maze. They began to move. It was a macabre procession. Kimberly took point, pistol drawn, moving with the fluid grace of a jungle cat. Ward and Brianna pushed the gurney. Shannon walked alongside, squeezing the ambu bag to breathe for the commander, who was drifting in and out of consciousness. The hospital corridors, usually places of healing, had turned into a haunted house. Shadows stretched long and distorted. Every creak of the building settling sounded like a footstep. I don't understand, Brianna whispered, her voice shaking. You're a spy? Kimberly didn't look back. I'm a ghost, and right now I'm the only thing standing between you and a closed casket. They reached the junction of the east wing. Kimberly raised a fist. Halt! She heard it, the soft squelch of a tactical boot on a wet floor. Around the corner. Target. Single hostile. Distance, 5 meters. Alert state. High. Kimberly holstered her pistol and pulled a scalpel from her pocket. A gunfight would draw the rest of them. This had to be quiet. Wait here, she breathed. She pressed herself against the wall, melting into the darkness. She waited. The footsteps grew closer. A shadow elongated across the floor. As the soldier rounded the corner, leading with his rifle, Kimberly didn't strike away. She stepped into him. She used her left hand to jam the rifle barrel upward, stepping inside his guard. Her right hand, holding the scalpel, moved in a brutal arc. She didn't slash. She punctured. Under the armpit, the subclavian artery. The soldier gasped, his strength instantly failing as blood pressure dropped to 0. Kimberly caught him as he fell, easing him to the ground silently. She stripped his radio and his sidearm, a SIG P226. She returned to the group, wiping the scalpel on her scrubs. Dr. Ward stared at her, his eyes wide with horror and a strange newfound respect. My God, he whispered. You just... Anatomy doctor, Kimberly said coldly. You fix it. I exploit it. Let's move. They reached the service elevators. Kimberly hit the call button, but the panel was dead. Power's out to the lifts, she cursed. We have to use the stairs, 3 flights down. We can't carry him, Ward protested, looking at Green's massive frame. He weighs over 200 pounds. With the equipment, it's impossible. Nothing is impossible, Kimberly snapped. Adapt or die. She looked at Green. Commander, can you walk? Green opened his eyes. Pain radiated from them, but beneath it burned a fire that refused to be extinguished. If you point me, he grunted. Get him up, Kimberly ordered. Ward, take his left. Brianna, take the IVs, Shannon. Keep bagging him. We walk. They hauled the wounded SEAL to his feet. He groaned, a low animal sound, but his legs took weight. It was a testament to the man's sheer will. They began the descent. The stairwell was pitch black. Kimberly led the way, using the tactical light on the stolen rifle to sweep the landings, step by step, agonizingly slow. Green was a dead weight, his boots dragging. Tell me, Green wheezed, looking at Kimberly. Why? Nursing? Kimberly kept her eyes on the landing below. Best cover. Nobody looks at the nurse. They look at the doctor, or the patient. I was invisible. Not anymore. Green managed a weak chuckle that turned into a cough. Quiet, Kimberly hissed. Contact below. Below them, on the second-floor landing, a flashlight beam swept across the wall. Voices. "Sweep the floor. King wants the head. No survivors?" They were trapped. Hostiles above. Hostiles below. Kimberly looked at the heavy fire door on the landing they were standing on. Second floor. MRI suite. "Change of plan," Kimberly whispered. "In here." She pushed the door open. They stumbled into the MRI reception area. "This isn't the basement," Shannon hissed. "This is a dead end." "It's a fortress," Kimberly corrected. She shoved a heavy filing cabinet in front of the door. "Get him into the scanner room, now!" They dragged Green into the main MRI chamber. The room was dominated by the massive donut-shaped magnet. "Ward, check him," Kimberly ordered. "Shannon, find me everything flammable. Alcohol, gauze, cleaning supplies. Go." Kimberly stood by the control panel. She looked at the giant machine. It was a GE 3.0 Tesla magnet, a monster, and the power was out, which meant the cooling system was offline. Technical data: superconducting magnet, quench hazard, magnetic field strength 30,000 times Earth's gravity. "What are you doing?" Ward asked, checking Green's dressings. "He's stable, but he's lost a lot of blood." "I'm building a mouse trap," Kimberly muttered. She found the emergency quench button, a break glass switch on the wall. It was designed to boil off the liquid helium, cooling the magnet in case of a life-threatening emergency, killing the magnetic field instantly. But if done aggressively... She turned to the intercom. The radio she had stolen crackled. "Ghost!" a voice came over the channel. Smooth, British accent, cultured and deadly. "I know you're listening." Kimberly picked up the radio. "Oliver, you're looking old." "And you're looking desperate, darling," King replied. "Stuck in a scanner room. Really? I expected better tradecraft." "Come and get me," Kimberly taunted. "I intend to. I have 6 men outside your door. You have a 9mm and a scalpel. Do the math." "I was never good at math," Kimberly said. "That's why I became a nurse." She clicked the radio off. "Everyone, listen to me," Kimberly addressed the terrified staff. "Get behind the machine. Stay on the floor. Cover your heads. Do not move until I say so." "What about you?" Brianna asked, tears streaming down her face. "I'm going to welcome our guests." Kimberly positioned herself behind the heavy control console in the tech room, which looked into the scanner room through a leaded glass window. She placed the stolen propane tank from a maintenance cart she found near the door. She cracked the valve. Gas hissed out, filling the small entryway. The door to the suite blew open. Boots crunched on glass. Laser sights swept the smoke. "Clear left, clear right, moving to scanner." 4 men entered the room. They wore full tactical gear, night vision goggles flipped down. They moved toward the scanner room door. Kimberly waited. She watched them through the glass. Her heart rate was 60. Calm. Objective. Total elimination. Method. Overpressure. As the point man reached the threshold of the scanner room, Kimberly raised her pistol. She didn't aim at the men. She aimed at the propane tank she had rolled into the hallway, now leaking gas into the confined space. "Say cheese," she whispered. She fired. The spark ignited the gas. The explosion wasn't a movie fireball. It was a concussive hammer blow. The pressure wave ripped through the hallway, turning the air into a solid wall of force. The 4 men were thrown backward like rag dolls. The blast blew out the windows and triggered the sprinkler system. But Kimberly wasn't done. 2 more men were coming through the smoke, staggering but alive. King's elites. She smashed the glass of the control room with a chair and vaulted into the hallway. The air was thick with smoke and water. One mercenary raised his rifle. Kimberly slid across the wet floor, baseball sliding into his legs. As he fell, she rose, pivoting on her knee, and drove the heel of her palm into his chin, snapping his head back. The second man tackled her. He was huge, heavy. He pinned her against the wall, his hands closing around her throat. "Die, bitch!" he screamed. Kimberly couldn't breathe. Black spots danced in her vision. She clawed at his face, but his visor protected him. She reached for her belt. The scalpel was gone. The gun was empty. Think, adapt, weapon of opportunity. Her hand grasped a heavy oxygen cylinder stand that had been knocked over. She gripped the steel canister. With a guttural roar, she swung the cylinder like a club. It connected with the side of his helmet. The Kevlar cracked. The impact stunned him, loosening his grip. Kimberly didn't hesitate. She drove her knee into his groin, and as he doubled over, she grabbed his own combat knife from his vest sheath. "No!" she rasped. She buried the blade in the gap of his armor, just above the collarbone. He went limp. Kimberly dropped the knife. She stood in the ruin of the hallway, drenched in water from the sprinklers, chest heaving. 6 men down, but the radio crackled again. "Impressive," King's voice said. He didn't sound angry. He sounded amused. "You took out my Bravo team, but I have plenty more. And I just cut the water to the sprinklers. Now, I'm going to burn the building down." Kimberly looked back at the scanner room. Ward, Shannon, and Brianna were peering out, their faces pale masks of disbelief. The new nurse was gone forever. The war had just begun. The air in the hallway had changed. It was no longer just the sterile chill of a hospital. It was becoming a convection oven. The smell was the first warning, acrid, chemical, and stinging. It was the scent of burning commercial carpet, melting PVC insulation, and the terrifying copper-tinged odor of superheated drywall. Oliver King wasn't bluffing. He had ignited the lower levels, likely using military-grade incendiaries to ensure the fire spread vertically through the elevator shafts. "We're going to burn," Brianna sobbed, her voice hitching as she coughed into the crook of her elbow. "Oh God, we're going to die in here." The smoke was already hazing the air in the wrecked hallway outside the MRI suite, curling along the ceiling like dirty water. The emergency strobes cut through the gloom, turning the scene into a disorienting rhythmic nightmare of red and black. Kimberly Hughes ignored the panic. Panic was a luxury for the living. They were currently in survival limbo. She checked the magazine of the SIG P226 she had taken from the dead mercenary. She pressed her thumb against the top cartridge. It depressed slightly. 7 rounds, 7 9mm hollow points against a firestorm and a hit squad. It wasn't enough for a war, just enough for a funeral, if she was careful about who she buried. Objective: vertical extraction. Obstacle: Class A and C fires below, hostile containment team above. Structural integrity compromised. Time window: less than 5 minutes before asphyxiation or thermal layering. "Get up," Kimberly commanded, her voice cutting through Brianna's sobs like a blade. She moved to the emergency wall mount and shattered the glass with the butt of the pistol, retrieving a heavy, red-handled fire axe. The basement is no longer an option. The fire will turn the stairwells into chimneys. The updraft will suck the oxygen right out of our lungs before the flames even touch us. We have one way out. The roof? Doctor, Ward choked out, wiping eyes that were streaming from the smoke. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold on to the gurney rail. "You said there was a sniper. You said the roof was a kill zone." "It is," Kimberly said, testing the weight of the axe, feeling the balance point. "But fire is a mathematical certainty. The sniper is a probability. I deal in probabilities." She turned to Green. The commander was pale, his skin clammy and grey, classic signs of advancing hypovolemic shock. But he had pulled himself upright, using the MRI machine for support, his teeth gritted in agony. "Can you hold a weapon, Commander?" Kimberly asked, her tone professional, treating him not as a patient, but as a compromised asset. Green nodded grimly, sweat beading on his forehead. "Give me the hardware." Kimberly handed him her original Glock 43. "It's empty. The slide is locked back. But they don't know that. Use it for intimidation. If they get close, use it as a blunt impact weapon. Aim for the temple or the bridge of the nose." "Lead the way. Ghost," Green rasped, gripping the empty gun with white-knuckled intensity. They moved. Kimberly took point, the fire axe held across her chest. They bypassed the main stairwell, which was already belching thick, oily black smoke that rolled out like a physical barrier. The heat emanating from the door was intense enough to singe hair. "Maintenance access," Kimberly signaled, pointing to a nondescript service door at the end of the radiology wing. "It runs parallel to the heavy plumbing. It's insulated." She kicked the door open. It wasn't a hallway. It was a vertical shaft, a tight squeeze filled with pipes, conduit, and a steel ladder bolted to the concrete. It smelled of grease and dust. "Shannon, you go first," Kimberly ordered, her eyes scanning the rear for movement. "Then Brianna, then Ward. Help the commander up. I'll cover the 6. "I can't climb that," Ward protested, looking at the narrow, dark shaft. "I'm claustrophobic." Kimberly grabbed him by the lapels of his scrubs and shoved him against the doorframe. Her eyes were terrifyingly void of empathy. "Doctor, behind you is death by fire. Above you is a chance. If you freeze in that shaft, I will shoot you in the leg to get you moving. Do I make myself clear?" Ward swallowed hard, nodding rapidly. "Crystal." As they ascended the metal rungs, the heat rose. The walls of the shaft were warm to the touch, vibrating with the roar of the fire consuming the floors below. It was a hellish ascent. Green groaned with every step, his abdominal wound screaming, but he didn't stop. Shannon and Ward hauled him upward, hand over hand, fueled by pure adrenaline. They emerged onto the 4th floor, the administrative level. Kimberly pushed the grate open and pulled herself out, rolling instantly into a crouch, axe ready. It was dark, quiet, and surprisingly clear of smoke for the moment. Cubicles stretched out like a maze, but the silence was broken by the distinct, rhythmic thud of heavy boots sprinting on the floor above. "They're sweeping the upper floors," Kimberly whispered, analyzing the acoustics. "King is collapsing the perimeter. They're heading for the roof to cut off extraction." She looked at her team. They were ragged, covered in soot, blood, and grime. The doctors who had mocked her for dropping a hemostat were now looking at her with the desperate, wide-eyed devotion of religious zealots looking at a prophet. "We have to breach the roof access door before they lock it down," Kimberly said. "Ward, Shannon, you are the diversion." "The what?" Shannon whispered, horrified. "Take the fire extinguishers from the hallway wall. When I give the signal, discharge them simultaneously. Create a cloud. White noise. Visual obscurant. It will look like the fire has breached the floor." Kimberly moved to the heavy steel door leading to the roof stairs. She didn't open it. She placed her ear against the cold metal, closing her eyes to filter out the background noise of the fire alarms. Audio signature. One voice. Static squelch. Radio chatter. "Sector 4 clear. Moving 2. One hostile. On the landing." She stepped back, took a deep breath, and kicked the door right below the handle with a piston-like front kick. The lock shattered, and the door flew open. A mercenary standing on the landing spun around, his rifle raising. He was fast, but he was reacting to a visual. Kimberly had already calculated the trajectory. She threw the fire axe. It rotated once, a blur of silver and red in the emergency lighting, and buried itself in the man's ceramic chest plate with a sickening crunch. The blade didn't penetrate the armor fully, but the kinetic force of the heavy axe head hitting the sternum was like a sledgehammer. It knocked the wind out of him, and sent him stumbling backward down the concrete stairs. "Go! Go! Go!" Kimberly screamed, sprinting past the fallen man, grabbing his falling rifle, an MP5 submachine gun, mid-air. The roof of St. Jude's Hospital was a sprawling industrial wasteland of gravel, massive ventilation units, and tangled piping, all whipped by a fierce, biting night wind. To the east, the city skyline glittered with indifferent electric brilliance, thousands of people going about their lives, unaware of the war zone 500 feet in the air. To the west, the helipad sat raised on a steel platform, illuminated by amber perimeter lights. But between them and the helipad lay 50 yards of open killing ground. "Get behind the HVAC units!" Kimberly shouted, shoving Ward and Green toward a row of large metal condensers just as the air snapped. Crack! A bullet sparked off the gravel inches from Kimberly's foot, sending stone fragments stinging into her shin. The sound arrived a split second later, a flat, high-velocity crack from the adjacent building. Threat assessment: sniper. Position: 10 o'clock high. Distance: 400 meters. Wind: 15 knots cross, gusting. Weapon: large caliber. Likely .300 Winchester Magnum or .338 Lapua. "He's got us pinned!" Green yelled, leaning heavily against the vibrating metal unit, blood seeping through his bandages. "Ghost, you can't cross that gap. He's dialed in." Kimberly peered around the edge of the unit. The sniper had the angle. He commanded the high ground on the hotel roof across the street. King and his remaining men would be coming through the roof access door any second. They were the anvil. The sniper was the hammer. She looked at Dr. Ward. "Doctor, give me your white coat." Ward blinked, hugging the stained garment. "What? Why?" "Give it to me. Now." Ward stripped off his blood-stained lab coat, shivering in his scrubs. Kimberly grabbed a mop handle from a janitorial cart left near the vents, a relic of a peaceful world. She draped the coat over it, buttoning the top button. "When I say now, you lift this up," Kimberly ordered, positioning Ward at the left edge of the HVAC unit. "Make it dance. Make it look like a panicked doctor trying to run." "You want him to shoot me?" Ward shrieked, his voice cracking. "He'll shoot the coat. I need him to take the shot. I need his muzzle flash. I need to know exactly where he is." Kimberly moved to the far right edge of the HVAC unit, resting the MP5 on the metal. It was a submachine gun, useless at 400 meters, but she also had the SIG P226, still useless unless she changed the target. "Now!" Ward squeezed his eyes shut and raised the coat on the stick. He bobbed it frantically. Crack! The coat jerked violently, a hole tearing through the fabric where a chest would be. Kimberly saw it. A tiny star-like bloom of light on the dark rooftop across the street. It wasn't just a sniper nest. He was positioned directly beneath the massive red neon sign of the hotel. Specifically, right under the humming industrial electrical transformer box that powered the giant letters. Target: transformer cooling fins. Oil-filled. High voltage. She holstered the pistol and raised the MP5. She set the selector to single fire. She exhaled, emptying her lungs to steady her heart rate. Objective: catastrophic failure. Windage. Hold 2 inches left. She fired 3 rounds, rapid succession. Pop! 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 The bullets didn't hit the sniper. They slammed into the transformer box above him. The result was instantaneous. The transformer sparked, groaned, and then exploded in a shower of white-hot sparks and flaming dielectric oil. The neon sign shattered, raining glass. The sniper, blinded by the sudden flash and sprayed with burning oil, flailed. He screamed, a sound swallowed by the distance, and fell back from the ledge, his rifle clattering away. "Threat neutral!" Kimberly yelled, the adrenaline surging. "Move to the helipad! Move!" They broke cover, sprinting for the raised platform. The wind whipped at their clothes. Kimberly stayed behind, walking backward, covering their retreat. The roof access door burst open. Oliver King walked out. He didn't run. He didn't crouch. He walked with the arrogance of a man who owned the battlefield. He wore a tailored tactical coat, the collar turned up, holding a custom AR-15 with expensive optics. He was flanked by 2 massive bodyguards in full heavy armor. "End of the line, darling," King called out, his voice carried by the wind, eerily calm. "Nowhere left to run. You played a good game. Better than I expected from a bedpan changer." Kimberly stood her ground in the center of the roof. She dropped the MP5. It was empty. She dropped the cig. Empty. She stood empty-handed, feet planted in the gravel. "I'm not running, Oliver," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a terrifying finality. "And I'm not playing." "Brave," King sneered, raising his rifle to his shoulder. "Stupid, but brave. Any last words?" From the helipad, Commander Green watched. He was too weak to fight, strapped into the safety netting by Shannon. But he still had his voice. He grabbed the tactical radio Kimberly had dropped earlier. He keyed the mic, broadcasting on the open military emergency channel. "Broken Arrow!" Green roared into the radio, summoning the last of his strength. "I repeat, Broken Arrow! Position confirmed. Danger close. Clear hot!" King paused. His finger froze on the trigger. He looked at the sky. A low, thrumming sound began to vibrate in their chests. It wasn't the sirens of the police. It was deeper, heavier, the sound of air being beaten into submission. The Black Hawk helicopter rose from the edge of the building like a prehistoric predator surfacing from the deep. Its matte black fuselage absorbed the city lights. The rotor wash hit the roof with hurricane force, whipping up a storm of gravel and dust that stung the skin. The minigun mounted on the side door spun up with an electronic whine that sounded like a dentist's drill from hell. King's eyes went wide. The arrogance evaporated. "Cover!" The minigun roared, a continuous ripping sound, like canvas tearing, spitting 3,000 rounds per minute. The tracer fire formed a solid laser beam of red light. It chewed up the roof access door, shredding the concrete and turning King's 2 armored bodyguards into red mist and scrap metal. King dove behind a concrete pylon, pinned, debris raining down on him. The helicopter hovered over the helipad, the pilot holding it rock steady despite the crosswinds. A winch cable dropped, swaying near Green. "Go!" Kimberly screamed to the staff over the roar of the rotors. "Get the commander on the winch! Clip him in!" Ward and Shannon scrambled, their hands fumbling with the carabiners. They strapped Green into the rescue harness. As the winch began to lift him, Green looked down at Kimberly. He pointed frantically to the empty harness loop. "Come on!" Kimberly shook her head. Her eyes were locked on the concrete pylon. King was still alive. She saw his shadow moving. If she left, he would escape. He would vanish, recover, and hunt them down. He would finish the job. She turned her back on the rescue. She reached into her scrub pocket and pulled out the last item she possessed. A syringe of epinephrine, 1 to 1,000 concentration, cardiac stimulant. She had swiped it from the crash cart in Chapter 1, hours ago. She sprinted. King popped out from behind the pylon, his face bloody from concrete shrapnel, firing his AR-15 wildly one-handed. A bullet grazed Kimberly's arm, spinning her around. She didn't stop. She used the rotational momentum to slide across the loose gravel, coming in low around the pylon like a baseball player sliding into home. King swung the rifle, using it as a club. The stock connected with Kimberly's ribs. She heard the crack of bone, grunted, tasting copper blood, but she caught the barrel with her left hand. She twisted, using the leverage of the long barrel against him, to rip the weapon from his grip. They stood face to face, the mercenary and the nurse. King drew a combat knife from his chest rig. The blade glinted. "You were always a nuisance, Hughes." He lunged, a killing thrust aimed at the heart. Kimberly didn't block. She stepped inside the arc. She took the blade. It sank into her left shoulder, grating against the scapula. She screamed, a primal sound, but she didn't retreat. The pain was just data. The knife was now an anchor. It locked his right arm in place. He couldn't pull it back. "Gotcha," she hissed, her face inches from his. With her right hand, she uncapped the syringe with her teeth and jammed the needle into the side of his neck, into the carotid artery. "Nighty-night, Oliver." She depressed the plunger. A massive, lethal overdose of pure adrenaline hit his brain and heart directly. King's eyes bulged. He gasped, clutching his chest as his heart rate spiked to 300 beats per minute instantly. His heart hammered itself into a fatal arrhythmia. The muscle seized. He collapsed to his knees, clawing at his throat, then fell face down on the gravel, twitching. Kimberly pulled the knife from her shoulder with a sickening, wet sound. Her vision blurred. The world tilted. She staggered toward the helipad. The chopper was waiting. The crew chief was waving frantically. Ward and Shannon ran to her, ignoring the rotor wash. They grabbed her arms, supporting her weight. They didn't see a clumsy girl. They didn't see a subordinate. They saw a savior. They hauled her into the cabin just as the pilot banked the Black Hawk away, diving toward the safety of the dark river, leaving the burning hospital behind them like a funeral pyre. Inside the cabin, the noise was deafening, but a strange peace settled over them. The red tactical lights bathed them in a womb-like glow. A Navy corpsman began working on Kimberly's shoulder immediately, applying a pressure dressing. Commander Green sat opposite her, wrapped in a thermal blanket. He unclipped his oxygen mask. He looked at Dr. Ward, huddled and shaking. He looked at Shannon, whose face was streaked with soot and tears. He looked at Brianna. Then he looked at Kimberly. Slowly, painfully, fighting the shock and the blood loss, the commander sat up straight. He ignored the pain. He raised a hand to his brow, a sharp, crisp, unwavering salute. Dr. Ward looked at Kimberly, blooded, bruised, eyes closing in exhaustion. The hierarchy of the hospital, the arrogance, the degrees, the titles, dissolved. Slowly the surgeon raised his hand, then Shannon, then Brianna. They all saluted the new nurse. Kimberly opened one eye, a faint, tired smirk playing on her pale lips. She looked at Ward. "Dr. Ward," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rotors. "Yes." Ward leaned in, expecting a profound final order, a code, a secret of the universe. "You're holding that gauze," she rasped, "like a toddler holding a crayon." St. Jude's Metropolitan Hospital was rebuilt, glass and steel rising from the ashes, but the legend of the new nurse remained etched in the foundation, stronger than concrete. Kimberly Hughes disappeared as quickly as she had arrived, a ghost returning to the shadows where she belonged, leaving no forwarding address and no paper trail. But for the staff who survived that night, the lesson was permanent. They learned that competence isn't always loud, and heroism doesn't always wear a cape. Sometimes it wears oversized scrubs, trips over IV stands, and fumbles with a tray. We walk through life judging books by their covers, mocking the quiet ones, the awkward ones, unaware that we might be standing in the presence of greatness. The person you overlook today might be the one who saves your life tomorrow. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more thrilling tales of hidden heroes and undercover justice.